The border crossing at Thousand Islands looked more like a painting than a checkpoint. Mist hung low over the St. Lawrence River, and the bridge arched quietly from upstate New York into Ontario like it had no idea it was connecting to countries. I remember gripping the steering wheel a little tighter as the US side faded in the rearview mirror. Ahead, a small bilingual sign welcomed me to Canada Bienvenue. I'd driven for hours through the full colors of New York, but the moment I crossed, something shifted. Not dramatically, just subtly. My phone buzzed with a text from my Canadian cousin. Don't forget to grab milk and a bag of ketchup chips. Ketchup chips. That was the first flag. But the real surprise hit at the first gas station. I stepped inside to grab coffee and couldn't find the creamers I was used to. Instead, the cashier offered me a double-double, and when I hesitated, she just smiled and added, "Welcome to Canada." The coffee was sweeter, warmer, somehow like the country itself. Back on the road, I noticed how quiet the highway felt. Same cars, same lanes, but people actually used their turn signals. No one tailgated, no aggressive passing. It was like everyone agreed to a secret code of calm. And then I saw it. A minivan had pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. Another car had already stopped to help. No honking, no crowd, just quiet, casual kindness. When I finally reached the suburb outside Ottawa where I'd be staying, I parked and stood on the street for a moment, just taking it all in. Kids were biking without helmets, which would have raised eyebrows back in Pennsylvania, and a man down the block was shoveling not only his driveway, but his neighbors. It wasn't performative. No one was watching, it just was. That evening, my cousin handed me a reusable bag as we walked into a grocery store. Don't forget they charge you for plastic here. I blinked, suddenly realizing I had no idea how to navigate this small, foreign version of a very familiar world. Liters instead of gallons. Bagged milk. A whole aisle of maple syrup. And signs in both English and French, everywhere. It felt like the US, but someone had dialed the intensity down and added a layer of softness. I was still in North America, but already I felt like I was being gently asked to unlearn something, and as I stood staring at the price of egg string to convert Canadian dollars in my head, an older woman noticed my confusion, smiled, and said, "First week here." I nodded, "Don't worry. It all makes sense." After a while, she moved on without waiting for a reply. That's when it hit me. Canada wasn't trying to impress me. It was inviting me to slow down and listen. And maybe, just maybe, become a little softer too. The first Monday morning felt like a test. My cousin had arranged for me to work remotely from their home while I settled into Canadian life. And I figured I'd mimic my usual American rhythm: coffee at 7, laptop open by 7:30, emails fired off before 8, but by 9:15, the house was still calm. My cousin strolled into the kitchen, still in flannel pajamas, sipping tea. "You're starting early," she said with a slight smile. "Most people here don't expect you to reply to emails until at least 9. I hadn't realized how much my identity was wrapped in hustle. In the States, being early was a kind of moral virtue. Here, it just felt unnecessary. Later that week, I joined her on a grocery run. At checkout, she handed over her reusable bags while I stood awkwardly with a pile of loose items. "Forgot your bags again, eh?" the cashier said with a playful grin. Not unkind, just Canadian. I paid with cash, half fascinated by the colorful plastic feel of the bills. They looked like toys, but they felt more honest than the green paper I was used to. My cousin leaned over and whispered, "Don't forget to tip." Not mandatory, but still appreciated, the unspoken rule. Generosity here wasn't transactional, it was quiet and thoughtful. What really threw me was the silence. Walking into a coffee shop, there was no music blasting. People spoke in low tones, no one facetimed in public. And when I accidentally bumped into a man near the cream station, he said, "Sorry," before I could. Even the dogs seemed polite. At one point, I reached for the door of a bank, and someone 15 feet ahead actually held it for me. But the deeper differences crept in slowly. At dinner one evening, a neighbor joined USA teacher who'd spent the afternoon skiing with her class as part of their winter phys ed. "We just build it into the curriculum," she said. keeps the kids connected to the seasons. That blew my mind. Back home, winter meant cancellation. Here, it meant adaptation. Driving, too, revealed a whole new etiquette. People waved when you let them merge. They used roundabouts correctly. And when I stopped at a four-way, I panicked for a moment. 3 cars had arrived at once. But instead of fighting for position, each driver paused like actors in a slow dance, each letting the others go. In the US, that same moment would have been a blaring horn symphony. Even conversations felt different. My American instinct was to share, to fill silences with stories and achievements. But here, I started noticing how Canadians circled the edges of vulnerability, first testing for safety, offering self-deprecating humor before diving deeper. No one bragged. Even successful people spoke with an easy modesty. It wasn't that ambition was absent, it just wasn't advertised. One moment stuck with me. I was walking through a quiet park near the river, bundled up and lost in thought, when an elderly man clearing snow from a path nodded and said, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" It was -10, but he meant it. And somehow, in that moment, I did too. I began to feel it, not a dramatic change, but a quiet internal recalibration, like my edges were softening, like I was learning to exhale in a place that didn't expect me to perform all the time. Spring came gently. The snow melted in slow, hesitant patches, and with it, something in me began to thaw too. I hadn't noticed how tightly wound I'd been until I wasn't anymore. My days now had quiet corners. I took walks without podcasts in my ears. I lingered over coffee instead of drinking it in gulps. Somewhere between the salted sidewalks and the silent subways, I had stopped rushing. One morning, while waiting at a bus stop, a teenager offered me their seat when they saw my ankle in a brace from a small slip on the ice. I laughed and declined, but they insisted, not out of pity, just instinct. That gesture, that reflexive decency, stirred something deeper than I expected. In the US, kindness like that sometimes feels like a performance, a moment to be witnessed. Here, it was invisible. It didn't need to be seen to matter. Still, not everything felt easy. I missed things I didn't expect to miss. The boldness of American conversation, the big energy in everyday life, the way strangers can become fast friends over one shared complaint in a checkout line. In Canada, connections grew like roots, slow, quiet, and deep. I had to learn to be patient with people, and more than that, patient with myself. My cousin noticed the change before I did. "You don't talk about work as much," she said one night as we watched the northern lights shimmer faintly beyond the tree line. "You used to lead with your job title. Now you talk about your walks." I smiled, not because I had an answer, but because she was right. Life here had taught me that your value doesn't begin and end with productivity. Looking back, I realized how much of my American mindset had been tied to proving something, to showing I was useful, accomplished, busy. Canada didn't demand those credentials. It just asked that I be decent, kind, present, that I show up with my shovel when someone else's car is stuck in the snow. I wasn't sure when exactly the shift happened, but I knew it was real the day I found myself quietly helping a new neighbor figure out the recycling schedule. Blue bin, black bin, green bin, without needing to be thanked. I just said, "Welcome to the neighborhood," and went back inside. It was the smallest thing, but it felt like a full circle moment. Living in Canada didn't erase who I was. It revealed who I could be when the noise faded and the pace softened. I still missed home, its messiness, its boldness, its energy, but I carried a new kind of calm now, one shaped by snowstorms, soft-spoken strangers, and the strange, beautiful power of ordinary kindness. And maybe that's the real culture shock. You come here expecting quirks, bagged milk, bilingual signs, polite drivers, but what stays with you is something quieter, the feeling of a society that chooses grace over speed. And once you've lived in that rhythm, it's hard to go back. If you've ever crossed a border, not just physically, but emotionally, you know the feeling. The slow, surprising realization that sometimes a different way of life doesn't just challenge you, it changes you.